Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight to learn about financial aid. It's so great to see that many of you have already had a session on financial aid, so I hope that I will be just as good as whoever you heard in the spring. As Ms. Thompson said, I'm going to speak for about an hour, and so if you could hold your questions, particularly since we're videotaping this, that way the whole presentation will be in one piece, and then we'll open it up to questions after that. And my one other favor that I would ask, I don't mind if you take photos of the slides, but please no additional videotaping. You already have access to the presentation on the school's website. The video will be posted, so if you still need to take pictures tonight, that's fine, but no video. So, one other thing that I'd like to get an idea of, how many are senior families here tonight? Okay, oh, most of you. So do I have any junior families? Oh, okay, lots of kids. All right, so here we go. Oops. Okay, so the things that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to give you what I call my terms and tools. So there's some terminology that you'll want to understand throughout the financial aid process, as well as some tools to assist you in the process as well. We're going to talk about filing the 2019-20 Free Application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. This is the application that all my senior families will need to complete. Junior families, you'll be looking at the 2020-21 application. We'll talk about the new FAFSA webpage as well as the mobile app for the FAFSA. I'll also talk about types and sources of aid, as well as the aid programs, and give you some tips at the end and along the way as we go through the presentation. If I would stop hitting the wrong things. Okay, so what is financial aid? So financial aid is money that helps a student pay for education expenses at a post-secondary school. And that can be a college, vocational school, or ultimately even graduate school as well. Now, as I said, tonight we're going to talk about the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Since that's the main application for aid, every school is going to ask for this application. And I just wanted to show you the new look for the website. For those of you with older children, this will look different. The federal government this summer unveiled a brand new FAFSA website. So this is what it looks like, and I can't fit the whole thing on the screen anymore, but this is what would come up initially, and then there's some more information down below. But I just wanted to show you what things look like. I have a lot more screenshots to show you later on. I went a little screenshot crazy today getting this ready, so you have plenty to look at. But when we complete this application, this is your application for all of the federal aid programs, federal grants, loans, and the federal work-study program. All of the information that you're putting on the application, all of the income information, all of the asset information, all of the age information, household size, all of that, all the information is being run through a formula called the federal methodology. The federal methodology was created by Congress, and what that formula does is it gives us a number from all of the information on the FAFSA. It's a number, that's the output of the FAFSA, and we call that output your expected family contribution, or EFC. So again, all of the information that's on the FAFSA is going to be run through a federally mandated formula that's going to give us a number, and we call that number your expected family contribution. The expected family contribution is really an index number that's used by the financial aid office to determine the student's aid eligibility. And it stays the same regardless of college choice, because the EFC is based on all of the student's personal information, not the college information. So the EFC really belongs to the specific student. And also understand that the expected family contribution is not necessarily the amount of money that you will pay, and it is definitely not the amount of federal aid that you will receive. Just to give you kind of another look at the expected family contribution, it can also be looked at as a measurement of the students and the family's ability to pay for post-secondary educational expenses, and it's composed of both a student contribution as well as a parent contribution for those students that do have to put parental information on their FAFSA. So it's important to note that student income, student assets do have to be reported on the FAFSA. Actually, for you parents, the FAFSA is a student, it's really a student application. It's not a parent application. I'm sorry to to just point you with that right now, but it is the student's application for aid. It's not a family application and it's not a parent application. Okay, so now some more terminology that you'll hear during the financial aid process. One of those items is something called the cost of attendance. So in financial aid, we want to determine the overall cost for a student to attend our particular institution. And we have what we call direct expenses. So those are things that are generally billed, they're billable expenses by the college. So those things are like tuition and fees, room and a meal plan if your student is living on campus. But a cost of attendance also includes indirect expenses, so things that the university is not billing for, but you need to plan for. So those are things like books and supplies, like transportation expenses, like personal expenses. And I get asked a lot, well, why does that matter? What does that mean? Why do I have to worry about transportation? Well, you want to be sure when you're choosing the institution that you make sure that you've taken into consideration all of the costs to attend the school. Tuition and fees and room and meal plan are not the only costs. With transportation, your student needs to get to and from college, and that means a different thing depending upon where they're going. Are they going to Rutgers and living at home? Are they going to go to University of Southern California, and that requires a plane ride? Are they going somewhere in Florida? Are they staying home and going to local community college? Sorry, this is my first visit here, so I've been through parts of New Jersey that I've never been to, so I'm working on the geography right now. But also, even when they're home, do they have a reliable vehicle? Do you live along a mass transit route? How will they get to and from school? And regardless of what that choice is, there's an expense related to that. With personal expenses, we understand that students have costs while they're in school. My picture on the far right there with the toilet paper, the toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, things like that. There's entertainment, clothing, those types of things. So we're trying to include all the potential costs to attend college. So that's what the cost of attendance is. And the last term that I want to tell you about is something called financial need. As you move along in the financial aid process, you'll hear that certain types of aid is need-based, or you might hear you have to have financial need to receive that particular award. So how do we determine who has financial need and for how much? Well, we do this simple equation here on the screen. We take the cost of attendance, so the overall cost to attend the institution, and we subtract from it your expected family contribution, that number that the federal government gives us from processing all of the information on the FAFSA. That gives us your financial need. Let's put some numbers to this. So let's say I'm looking at two different schools here, and I have one school where the cost of attendance is $40,000. In my example, my expected family contribution is $15,000. At school, the first school that I have listed there, my financial need is $25,000. But I'm also looking at a school a little bit more expensive. Cost of attendance is $65,000. My EFC stays the same at $15,000, giving me $50,000 in financial need at that second school. So in real life, what does that mean? At school number one, I can get up to $25,000 in need-based aid, and at school number two, up to $50,000 in need-based aid if it's available. Not every college across the country has enough funding to provide, to fulfill 100% of all their students' financial need. Those that do, it's something that they prominently will display on their financial aid website. You can also Google colleges that cover 100% of financial need and get the list of those schools that do that. It's going to be a minority of institutions, but you can certainly take a look at that. And then the rest of us just try to fill in and fulfill as much of your financial need as we possibly can. So one of the tools that I want to provide you with is something called a net price calculator. Every college and university across the country has to have a net price calculator on their website. Usually you'll find it on the financial aid page. And usually you can find financial aid information in general if you go under the admission area for the college or university. Usually under that heading you'll find costs or tuition or financial aid, something with that heading under the admission area. What a net price calculator does is it will give you an estimate of the aid that your student is eligible for at that particular institution. You will have to enter some income information, and then it will return to you an estimate of the student's aid eligibility and also provide you with cost information for that particular institution. There is no one place for a net price calculator in that you can't plug it in and go to one spot and type in the schools that you want it to be for. You have to go to the individual colleges, to their website, and use their individual net price calculator to get the information. So if your student's looking at 10 or 12 schools, that might be a little bit of time to put into it, but definitely very much worth it. It gives you an idea of that aid eligibility, and some things might not be such a surprise down the road when you get the official award notification. The other tool that I want to tell you about is the FAFSA Forecaster. At this point in time, this tool would really be most helpful to my junior families, because senior families, it'll be time to file the FAFSA in less than a week. What the FAFSA Forecaster does is allow you to complete a FAFSA, but it's not sent out to any schools. It's not officially processed, basically doesn't go anywhere. But it lets you get used to the questions that it asks. It also lets you get an estimated expected family contribution as well. Where you can find it is, the website is FAFSA.gov that I have up there in the top right of the screen. When you're on the home page that I showed you in the beginning, when you scroll down to the bottom, this section is what you'll see. This Start to Think About College. And the last entry there at the bottom says estimate your federal aid using FAFSA Forecaster. And you would click on that, and then it would walk you through the steps to do that. So again, another early read on your expected family contribution. So now let's talk about our FAFSA for 2019-20. So we can file as early as October 1st, 2018. So that's for my senior families. Again, junior families, you have a year. We use what's called a prior year format, in that we're using income from 2017 to complete the application for 2019-20. So you're using 2 years prior income to complete the application. There are some questions on the FAFSA, things like the marital status, assets, are all as of the day you complete the FAFSA, so do be sure to read all of the questions, but the tax year that's being used is 2017. And the reason for that is that income should be done and finalized at this point in time. Really, you would have filed your taxes, hopefully, last April. Even if you're on extension, that's going to be up in a couple of weeks, so that way you can complete the FAFSA with accurate income. Under the old way that this was done, you would always have to estimate your income because you couldn't file until January and you had to use income from the immediate past year. No one has their taxes done on January 1st, so it made it difficult. So this way, more people can complete their FAFSA with accurate and confirmed information. As always, with the FAFSA, do check with the colleges that your student is interested in for any sort of filing deadline that they might have. Some schools may have deadlines coming up later on in the fall, maybe in December, that they want all the FAFSA applications to be completed. So do make sure that your deadline for filing is the earliest deadline established by any college that your student is interested in. And then last but not least, down on there, I gave you this website. It's studentaid.gov/resources. This page, it's one part of the studentaid.gov website, which contains all kinds of information on federal aid and the whole process and all of the aid programs. But this page is a gathering of all the resources that are available. This includes looking at PDFs of all the handouts. Actually, almost everything that's federal that we're giving out tonight, you can view on this resource page. There are graphics that you can view. There are videos that you can look at. There are also recordings of webinars that the federal government has put on, so it is a really great resource for reading and looking at additional information related to the financial aid process. Okay, so now when we go to actually file our FAFSA, we are going to do it online at FAFSA.gov. Important that you go to the site that ends in .gov. That is the official Department of Education website, and that's where you can file the FAFSA for free. The letters in FAFSA do stand for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So you should not pay to file the FAFSA to complete it in any way. You should not have to pay any money. So always make sure you're at the website that ends in .gov. You'll want to use the button on the left side that says Start Here, and it's the new to FAFSA.gov. Submitting the FAFSA, I almost couldn't read what it said on there. Submitting the FAFSA, it's quick and, well, geez, I can't even read what it says. And get started today. So start here with the red arrow. The other side on the right, that's the returning user. So that's if any of you have older children, they would click on the login because they filed already. And actually after the FAFSA has been processed, if you need to go back and make any corrections, add more schools onto it, anything like that, you would go back to the login because then you would be a returning user. What's important to note, you have to file a FAFSA every year for every student you have in college. So this is not a one and done application. It's every student, every year. So if this is student number 1, okay, you do theirs, and then as student number 2 is going to come along the following year, then year 2, it's going to be 2 applications. You're going to be filing for your older child's second year in college and then the next child's first year in college. So always every year for each student. Along with the main page of the FAFSA, the look of everything inside in the application has also changed. Hopefully for those of you who have filed before, if I have any of you in the audience, you'll notice a difference, a little bit of a cleaner look to the pages. So this is just wanting to show you what the login looks like, and actually when you go to log in to the application itself, you choose who you are. So I am the student. If you are the student, you can click on there and you'll enter information to get started. If you're not the student, that's fine. You would click on I am a parent, preparer, or student from a freely associated state, and there'll be different information that you would enter to get the application started. It's very important when doing the FAFSA that you know who you are. Now I know that that may sound silly, but people forget, and the federal government has been working hard to try to make sure that people know what their role is in completing the FAFSA and who they are, so that when parents sit down to do the application, they don't put their information in the student portions as well as in the parent portions. That's what ends up happening, and it becomes problematic with income. So when you as a parent report your income as your student's income, as well as your income, you would imagine that their aid eligibility would be thrown off by doubling basically the family income at one time. So it's always important, and I'll show you what they have in place to help you with that, but always make sure that it's student information when it's asking for student information, and then when it's asking for parent, it's parent information. And the bulk of the application is student information. In order to complete the FAFSA, students do need to meet certain requirements. They do need to have a high school diploma or its equivalent, or ultimately get that. I know they won't have that until June, but they'll ultimately need to get a high school diploma. They do need to be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program of study that leads to some sort of degree, certificate, or credential. It's okay, you can still complete the FAFSA before they've been admitted to their colleges. It's just ultimately they will need to be admitted in order for the school to process any financial aid for the student. Students also need to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. They also need valid social security numbers, and if required, they do need to be registered with Selective Service, and they can use the FAFSA to get registered. One other piece of information that you need in order to complete the FAFSA online is something called the FSA ID. This is pretty much the gateway into the application. It is a username and password that's created by both student and parent. And it's their access into the FAFSA. It's an electronic signature. It also offers access into other Department of Education websites for students as well. So as I have there, it's a legal signature on the FAFSA. It gives you that access to the other sites. Both the student and one parent need an FSA ID. As part of the process for creating this FSA ID, it will ask for email address and also for a mobile phone number. The reason for those is it helps when you forget this information, you want to retrieve it. You can use your phone or email address to help retrieve the forgotten information. But what's key with this is that email addresses and mobile phone numbers can't be used by more than one person. So parents, that means your student needs to have their own information in their FSA ID application, and parents, you put your own information on your side, and it will know, because if you do one way and then try to do the next one and enter that same information, it knows and it will tell you, sorry, you can't go on. You have to enter different information. Also, you'll want to be prepared when getting the FSA ID with Social Security number. Always triple and quadruple check Social Security numbers when you enter them with anything related to the FAFSA, because the information is cross-checked with the Social Security Administration. So make sure that what you're reporting matches the Social Security card. That goes for the name, the birth date, as well as the actual Social Security number. There'll be some challenge questions that you'll have to provide answers to, again, to help you retrieve the information when you forget it, along with that email and mobile phone number. And you can do this all, if you're so excited, tonight. You can go home and go to fsaid.ed.gov and get your FSA ID if you'd like to. Now, bless you, my other new thing to tell you about is that there is now something called the My Student Aid mobile app. I have it right here on my phone to show you all. So it really does exist. This is now a way to file the FAFSA on your phone. You can download it for Android or for Apple, so either way you can get the app. In order to complete a FAFSA through the mobile app, you do have to have an FSA ID. There's no other choices. You have to have that in order to get in. You can save, you can complete and submit the FAFSA all through the mobile app. And starting with the 2019-20 FAFSA application, what we call the IRS data retrieval tool, which I'll talk about more, will be available for 2019-20. Now, there are some differences between the mobile app and the website. Particularly for 2019-20. It is out there right now. You can only file at this moment for 2018-19. And as far as I know, there'll be an update to the app right around October 1st or in preparation for October 1st that's going to update for that 19-20 availability. I'm working off of information from a webinar, so because it's still not real yet for 2019-20, I'm going off of the information that I've gotten from the Department of Ed, and I don't know any students yet who've used the app for 18-19 because they released it in the summertime, which is really past peak season, which makes sense when you're wanting to do something like this, and we don't want it to crash in the middle of peak season. But I don't really have a lot of feedback yet on it, so I will be curious to see how it all works out. One of the big differences is roles, and you have to tell who you are when you go to log in, whether you are the parent, I'm the student, or I'm the preparer. And it actually personalizes your experience based on who you say you are in there, and allows you to answer certain questions based on the role that you play within the FAFSA process. It is a little bit more personalized than the FAFSA on the web, and there are some differences, and from what I gather, those differences are going to remain for the time being. But know that you have the option to use the app to complete the FAFSA. And it's called My Student Aid, so if you're going to look for it in like Google Play or Apple, sorry, I have an Android phone, you want to look for it as it's called My Student Aid. I think you can also look up FAFSA and you would be able to find it, but in case that's the way you'd like to go, hopefully it will work smoothly for you. Some other different, it's not so much new, but different information that I want to give you has to do with the look of the screens within the FAFSA. Some of the new things that they have done, as you go along, there always were tabs of the different sections of the FAFSA under the old website, but now you can really tell where you've left off. So if you have the green check mark, that means that section is complete. Where you have the blue pencil, that's what you're working on. And then if there's nothing, that means you haven't gotten that far yet. So you have that progress bar across the top. With the web, FAFSA on the web, as well as the app, particularly with the app, they're doing a lot of encouragement to help you get through the application and congratulating you as you get to certain steps and whatnot. I'm not sure. I think that if phones maybe gave out like snacks or something, maybe you would get something. But I don't know. I guess it shows my age when I'm like rolling my eyes at the computer at the webinar, then I'm like, really? They need encouragement? But that's what will happen. You'll get all these congratulations as you go through and complete each section. What else? And so here's this blue ribbon up at the top left. Will always be blue, but depending upon who needs to put information on that page, it will say either parent information or student information. Those of you who have filed before, there was always along the left-hand side of the screen, it denoted whose information it had to be, but there was also a color change involved, so that even the color when it went from student to parent changed. The ribbon up there will always be blue, but the name, whether it says parent or student, will change. This message will be on here a lot. This one, which I can read, says, because the FAFSA belongs to the student, you and your always, unless otherwise noted, refer to the student. So that's important to note because parents, you might start off okay and you're being your student as you're doing this, but then you start to forget the you and the your and you start answering the questions like you would for yourself. So always remember if you're doing anything in the student section, that it always relates to your student, and then when you're in parent, then it truly is yours. And that's one of the things in the mobile app, the language works depending upon your role. So if you go in as the parent, it's going to have better language when you're in the student questions to make sure that you're not answering them incorrectly. Finally, how do you get help? So under the old FAFSA, there used to be a help and hints box along the right-hand side of the screen on every screen. Now what it is, you have the little question marks with every question. So if you're not sure how to answer that particular question, if you just click on the question mark, the help and hints box will open up and give you additional information about answering that particular question. It's similar in the app as well. There are the question marks and there is all help in there as well. Another tool to help you get through the FAFSA itself for the income questions, we have something called the IRS Data Retrieval tool. This is incredibly helpful with the income information. What it does is allow you to download your income information directly from the IRS into the FAFSA. It takes just a few seconds once you've authenticated your identity with the IRS. So what you'll see when you're on the income pages, once it gets to the point where it comes time for tax information, you're going to see this link to the IRS. And if you click on it, you're going to get the message that I have below, that it's just letting you know you're leaving the FAFSA site. Your FAFSA will still be up on your computer, but to actually get the IRS information, it's going to transfer you over to an IRS website, and you would click proceed to the IRS site. The pages, the screens for the IRS, they have not done any updating or made any changes. This is what the IRS has had, but just to give you an idea of what things look like, again, you have like the message up here that you left. This is the Department of U.S. government and whatnot. You'll have all of the data will be presented to you that's going to transfer, and then you'll finally get to this transfer, do not transfer, and click on through. And also with all of those, even on here, you have the little question marks. If you're not sure what any of it means, you can click on the question marks for help. What did I want to tell you? All right, so with the data retrieval tool, there are some tax filers who won't be able to use the data retrieval tool, but the majority of people will be able to. Those that can't use it, if you didn't say you filed a return on the FAFSA, well, of course, it's not going to direct you to the IRS if you said you didn't file FAFSA. If whether you're the student or the parent, if your marriage date is January 2017 or later, the first 3 digits of your social security number are 666. I did a little research today. No one should have a social security number that starts with 666. They have excluded that from the series of numbers. If you filed a non-US tax return, if you're married and filed as head of household or filed separate returns. What it's talking about there with like the separate returns and whatnot, the IRS data retrieval tool can't do math. So it can't take 2 tax returns and combine them for FAFSA purposes. So that's something that you would have to do separately on your own. Neither parent entered a valid social security number, and non-married parent or both married parents entered all zeros for their social security number. So for the most part, you should be able to use the data retrieval tool. What is important when you go to do the data retrieval tool itself, you have to authenticate your identity with the IRS. So you need to make sure that your name and address that you type in for the authentication process matches what you put on your tax return. So you may still need to pull out the 2017 tax return to copy from it. And I'm as specific as you live at 123 Main Street. It makes a difference whether on your tax return you wrote ST for street or STREET for street. And if you do the opposite, for the authentication, it will not authenticate you because it's not exactly as it is on your tax return. So that's important to know and to help reduce frustration with trying to do that. What's also happening with the data retrieval tool is that when it transfers over the income information, once it's transferred and it's in the FAFSA itself, you will no longer see the actual income figures. You'll see it on the IRS side, but you won't see the figures when you transfer over. Why is that, Kristen? Well, because that sounds silly, but here's what happened. What is it, going on 2 years now? The site was hacked. And there was something to do with people being able to view your income information once it was transferred over into the FAFSA. So they had to come up with some tighter security for it. So the way that they're doing that, and to prevent people from seeing things when you transfer it over, is that you won't see the actual numbers. Any field that's filled in by the data retrieval tool will say transferred from the IRS. So you won't end up overwriting anything, and you'll know what fields have actually been filled in, but you won't see the actual numbers. There'll also be, if you happen to have either this year in 2017 or any of the years while your student's in school, if you have an IRA or pension rollover, there'll be some screening questions for that to help exclude that from the income information. If you rolled it over, you didn't have any access to it. So if anyone did have a rollover, keep your eyes out for those screening questions. One of the things that the data retrieval tool won't fill in is your actual income earned from work if you're married, because again, it can't do math on it. It can just transfer over information. So if there's 2 incomes, or it really doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 2 incomes, you have to fill in that actual income earned from work. So whether, one parent made $10,525 and one parent made $50,525, you have to break it up whichever way is the correct way. Don't change any of the data from the IRS. We at the schools will know that and would flag your student's application for some verification, because we'd wonder why you changed the numbers that the IRS confirmed for you. And also, very important, do not update the FAFSA to 2018 income. We're not using 2018. We're using 2017 income information for the 1920 FAFSA. I'll have more on what if my income changed? I have more of that later on, so hold tight for that part of it, but just don't change anything on your own. Some other screenshots that I want to show you. You do have to electronically sign the FAFSA. And so when you get to that part of the FAFSA, it will walk you through this. It does the same steps for student and then for parent. So it would say, it says, okay, now it's time for student signature, sign this FAFSA. So you would click it. And then you would get the confirmation that student signed with their FSA ID, and then the last step would be to submit my FAFSA now. So again, just to know that there is an actual signature process at the end, and you want to make sure that you're doing that submit my FAFSA now so that you get to the FAFSA confirmation page. This lets you know, congratulations, your FAFSA has been filed. You'll get an estimated expected family contribution down here. All these little fields down here, you can expand or collapse them as needed. So you'll have expected family contribution information, IRS information, all the schools that you listed on the FAFSA, you'll be able to review them, and it will give you some data on the schools as well. One of the things that you don't see in here, because this was a demo student that I was doing. I think his name was Abe last name. So it's just demos that the federal government gives us to take a look at. With New Jersey residents, what will happen is right here before these little bricks down here, there'll be some additional options and some things that you can do. And one of those will be to start your state aid application. The state of New Jersey has a grant program for New Jersey residents that remain in New Jersey for college. And in order to determine the eligibility for that award, some additional questions need to be answered. They're collected by the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, and that's the agency that manages all of this grant program. The additional items are not specifically requested on the FAFSA, so you're not repeating really any information. There's going to be blue boxes down there at the bottom of that confirmation page, and it'll say start your state application to apply for New Jersey state-based financial aid. So make sure to click through and do that, and from what I'm told, it will be available on the app as well as the website. These are the additional bits of information that the state is asking for. In 2017, they're asking for any earned income credit that was received. Understand that earned income credit is not a total of your income. It is a tax credit. So you'd have to look at a specific line on your tax return to see if you had any earned income credit. If you collected any untaxed Social Security income, because untaxed Social Security benefits are not reported on the FAFSA at all. For students, if they didn't put their driver's license information on the FAFSA, they'll need to provide it. That helps confirm that they're a New Jersey resident. Parents, you'll also have to input Social Security number, last name, and first initial. Okay, so I want to kind of go over a bit of the whole process for financial aid and give you a few other tidbits related to filing the FAFSA itself. So one of the handouts that I brought with me tonight, this is something called the FAFSA on the Web worksheet. This is, it's for 2018-19 for the current school year, because this will not be available for 19-20 until after October 1st. Nothing becomes available like this that's printed until the FAFSA actually opens. But this gives you, as far as I can tell, there are no changes to the questions between 18-19 and 19-20. So this will give you a good idea of the majority of the questions on the FAFSA. It is simply a worksheet, a way for you to get used to the questions that are asked on the FAFSA. You don't send it anywhere. You see that on the bottom. Do not mail this worksheet. Go to FAFSA.gov to complete and submit your application. So it's just something to assist you, especially I feel like for those of you that you don't want to sit at the computer with the cursor blinking at you or things like that. This is a way to get things written out, and then all you have to do is transfer the information instead of having to run and gather documents. And speaking of running and gather documents and things like that, one of the other handouts that I gave you, this one says the FAFSA process. So this has the types of documents that you would need to gather before filing so that you'd have them all together in the same place, the actual filling out of the FAFSA, and then what happens when it's actually processed. So gave you some good information on that. Also gave you a handout on creating and using the FSA ID. So I tried to cover all those hot topics with the handouts that I brought with me today. One thing, parents, I do want to make you aware of a couple of questions that are on the FAFSA. And you can see from the FAFSA worksheet, the bulk of the FAFSA is about the student. One of the sections is called the student dependency status, and this section is very important. It determines whether or not a student is going to be considered independent, meaning not having to put parental information on the FAFSA, or a dependent student, meaning they will have to put parental information on the FAFSA. We have a lot of people that'll be like, oh, I'm going to file as independent. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't file as independent. You either meet the criteria to be an independent student, or you're not, and you're putting parental information on the FAFSA. So just for you to get a better idea of what qualifies a student for being independent, in that section 2, a student would have to meet one of the items in that section in order to be considered independent and not put parental information on the FAFSA. If none of those items apply to the student, they're moving on to the parental information. So I'll just go over them just so that you can understand how they work. And the first one, I was born before January 1, 1996. The year will bump up one more year for 1920. I'm serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces. Since I turned age 13, both of my parents were deceased. I was a dependent or ward of the court since turning age 13. I am married. I am a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. I was in foster care since turning age 13. I am currently, or I was, an emancipated minor. Understand that in New Jersey, emancipation is only used for child support purposes. So before you go run out tomorrow, talk to your lawyer about emancipating your student. It's not going to happen for FAFSA purposes. So I've given you one answer. No is the answer for that one. And don't try to, it's only used, if a student is emancipated, it means that someone no longer has to pay child support for that student, and that is not the burden of emancipation for the FAFSA. I'll be working on a master's or doctorate program. I now have or will have children for whom I will provide more than half of their support between July 1, 2019 and June 30th, 2020. I have dependents other than children or my spouse who live with me, and I provide more than half of their support. I am currently, or I was, in legal guardianship. Students make mistakes on this one because they say, yeah, I have legal guardians, my parents. No, not for this purpose. Legal guardianship for FAFSA purposes means that the guardianship is no longer with the parents and it's with someone else. Usually that means that most likely that a parent is deceased or something like that, that the guardianship has moved to somebody else. So that's one to watch out for, to make sure that it was completed correctly. The other time we get mistakes on this one is that students, someone has custody of the student, and custody is not the same as legal guardianship. So that's also something to make sure that if you have one of those situations, that you really look at the paperwork that you have to understand whether you truly are the student's legal guardian, or you just have custody. And then we also have I am homeless, or I'm at the risk of being homeless. So again, if none of those apply, the student will move on and the parent information will need to be completed. I did also want to give you some additional information, parents, because you will be asked about your marital status. And sometimes that we have people answering that incorrectly. So I want to give you some information about marital status. The marital status is one of those things that's as of the day you complete the FAFSA. So not what the status was in 2017. So that's one thing to know. It's not whatever your marital status was in 2017. It's whatever it is as of the day the FAFSA is completed. Parents, you'll have a choice of married, remarried, divorced, separated, never married, unmarried and both parents living together, and then widowed. So those would be your options. So I'll give you an example. My student's name is John. He lives with both of his legal parents who are married to each other. Great, marital status is married, and income information for both parents would be provided on the FAFSA. But now let's say John's parents get divorced. John lives with his mother. So when they go to fill out the FAFSA, the marital status is going to be divorced. And then only his mother's income information goes on the FAFSA. The way that the FAFSA works in divorce situations, or if you're separated, if you're living separately, but you're not divorced yet, it goes by the student, goes by the parent that the student lived with more during the last year, during the last 12 months. So in general, most students do live with one parent more than the other. It's only when the living time is exactly even that we're looking at the parent who provided more support. But when it's a divorce situation, parent that the student lived with more during the last 12 months, and then only that parent's information goes on the FAFSA. What will happen too is that it will only give enough answer boxes for one parent's information. So you can't even try to put two people on it when you've chosen the marital status of divorce separated. Now let's say John's mom marries someone else. He remains living with her, so she's the custodial parent. Then what would happen is her marital status would go back to, it would be remarried, but married, remarried is one answer. And then when they go to fill out the FAFSA, both the mother's information as well as the stepfather's information would go on the FAFSA. So yes, step parents do have to go on the FAFSA. It does not obligate the step parent to pay that child's education, does not obligate them to co-sign a loan, but that step parent's income information is a resource in that household, and it will go into the expected family contribution calculation. It cannot be appealed out. You can't contact the financial aid office and just say, my step parent doesn't pay for me, I don't want to count him on my FAFSA. We can't take it out. It has to be on there. The other thing that I wanted to mention too, related to divorce, also know too, for the parent that goes on the FAFSA, it's not what your divorce decree says related to college expenses. That's its own separate entity. And it's not who claims the child on the tax return. Because sometimes if you're divorced, you might go back and forth claiming, you know, I get them 1 year, you get them another year, that type of thing. You file your taxes in accordance with IRS regulations. You file the FAFSA in accordance with the FAFSA regulations. So just also understand that too when it comes time for that marital status information. And again, as of the date you complete the application. I do have some with me up here if anyone does have questions or concerns about who a parent is when you fill out the FAFSA. I do have some additional information that can help you out with that as well. So we get our FAFSA completed. Hopefully we use the data retrieval tool, make it a little bit faster to get it done. One of the other things you want to do is make sure that the college doesn't want anything more from you than just the FAFSA. The FAFSA is at a minimum, but some colleges want additional information. They may have their own institutional applications. They may also use something called the CSS Profile. This is a form put out by the College Board. It's used by mainly private institutions with a lot of institutional funds to spend. It will not change the student's federal aid eligibility. The profile is just used for institutional aid, so the money that comes from that college, and they want to know more. They want to know more information than what's on the FAFSA. They want to dig deeper into your asset information, maybe retirement information, that type of thing. And what the school is using it for is to further refine who they're going to give their institutional dollars to. So they want to drill down a little bit further than the FAFSA does with your income information. Once your FAFSA is completed and processed, this will take 3 to 5 business days for it to process, because in the background, once you submit it, there are a lot of different checks that are going on. It's checking with Social Security to confirm this, the Social Security information, and that also confirms the citizenship information. If you said you're a citizen, it will confirm that. If you're eligible non-citizen, it would confirm the alien registration number. It also checks on things like if you said you were a veteran, it will confirm or deny that status. It checks to see if you've borrowed any student loans before to make sure you're not over the limit or you've defaulted on any loans. So it's doing some of these other checks behind the scenes, so that does take time because they're with other agencies within the U.S. government. So once it's done all that, it will contact the student through email, if they provided a valid email address, to let them know that their FAFSA is complete and review their student aid report. That's what we call it once it's processed. Review the information, make sure everything's correct. If there were any problems with the processing, it would be noted on that student aid report. And then, how do we find out how much aid our student is going to receive? Well, that actually comes from the individual colleges and universities. It's not going to come from the federal government. They may give you an estimate and say, oh, it looks like you might be eligible for certain types of aid. But the official notification comes from the individual colleges and universities. You're going to, on the FAFSA, list them, the colleges that you want to receive the information. We'll all get it in that 3 to 5 business day window. And then if the student has been admitted to our university or accepted for enrollment, then we'll be able to generate what we call a financial aid award letter. The financial aid award letter details the types and amounts of aid the student is eligible for during the upcoming school year. The letter may come out or be generated by different means. It could be a letter that's mailed in the snail mail. It could be something that's emailed to the student. It could also be something where they have to log into the school's portal to view the information. Regardless of how the information is delivered, we still call it a financial aid award letter, and it still contains the same types of information. It's the aid eligibility for the upcoming school year. And also understand that for most students, they're not just getting money from one place. There's lots of different pieces that go into creating that financial aid award letter, and you're maybe getting some from the federal government, maybe some from the state, some from the college, some from an outside source. So it's all putting the pieces together to get you the funding that you need for that particular college. You can be asked to provide additional documentation. Both the federal and state governments have a verification process, and they do select applicants to be verified. If you are selected, don't panic. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not going to financial aid jail. It's just that we need to make sure that the information you reported on the FAFSA is indeed correct. Now, what's helpful is if you use the data retrieval tool, that will help cut down on the additional information that's needed, because when we can see that you transferred the information from the IRS, you didn't change anything, we know that that income information is valid. But there can be more beyond that that's needed than just the income verification. And ultimately, if your student decides to use student loans, the school will walk you through the process. Okay, so we want to make sure we take care of all the sources for aid. So we need to look at the college itself. That's what we call institutional aid. They may have aid that's merit-based, which means it's based on academic information, could be based on grades, high school grades, test scores, a combination of those. It could be based on financial need. So again, based on financial information. With the federal government, you filing the FAFSA takes care of all the federal resources for aid. Completing your FAFSA and answering the few additional state questions takes care of the state of New Jersey. You may have other resources in maybe tuition benefits through a job. If anyone is a veteran, you can transfer benefits to your dependent. Athletic scholarships, outside scholarships. So there are some other smaller resources for aid outside of the government and the institution itself. One other thing to make sure that you're aware of, that there are tax credits related to higher education. So although this won't help pay the bill up front, it may help lower your tax liability in future years. So I do recommend speaking with your tax professional about what credits you might be able to take advantage of. We also have various types of financial aid, and again, another thing to understand. Whenever you get that financial aid award letter, and if you have the XYZ scholarship on it, that's great. Scholarships do not have to be repaid. They're generally awarded on the basis of merit, skill, or unique characteristic, or even talent as well. If you get the XYZ grant, that's great as well, because grants don't have to be repaid either. But grants are generally usually awarded on the basis of financial need. You also have loans, which is money that's borrowed and repaid with interest, and also employment opportunities, whether the student is earning a paycheck to help with their education costs or some sort of non-monetary compensation like their room and meal plan being paid for. Now, you have one of the other handouts, this one that says, do you need money for college at the top? And this one has this lovely fold-out chart in the middle. This gives you a detail of all the federal aid programs. So everything that you see here on my screen, you'll have a listing of that inside inside the brochure. I'll just let you know that the federal government's main grant program is the federal Pell Grant. For this year, the maximum, or for 18-19, the maximum is $6,095 for full-time study. It is available at part-time study, and it's generally a portable grant. So what you qualify for at one school would be the same at another. So whether you're at a community college, a public institution, a private institution, your federal Pell Grant amount would be the same from institution to institution. The federal supplemental grant is generally awarded to those students also receiving the federal Pell Grant and can be for up to $4,000 a year. However, the supplemental grant can run out. Schools only have a limited amount to spend, and that's what may trigger some of the deadlines, is that if you get your FAFSA in by our deadline, if you qualify for that award, we know we have enough money to be able to pay it to you. After the deadline, even if you qualify, and if we've run out of money, we can't award it to you. If anyone's interested in teaching, there is the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education, or TEACH grant. It's for students interested in teaching in low-income districts in high-need subject areas. It's awarded for up to $4,000 a year, but the student does have to complete a teaching component after they graduate, and if they don't, they have to repay it. So want to make sure that that's exactly what they want to do. Iraq and Afghanistan service grants are for students who lost a parent as a result of their service in either Iraq or Afghanistan. State of New Jersey, their main grant program is called the Tuition Aid Grant, and one of the handouts that I brought tonight has information on the Tuition Aid Grant. It is for New Jersey residents that remain in New Jersey for college. The awards vary based on the type of institution. So the private institutions like Monmouth, we have the highest award values. We give out, the state of New Jersey, the maximum award at a private institution is over $12,000 a year. It's not as high at the publics and at the community colleges. NJ Stars allows students in the top 15% of their class to go on to their local community college and have their tuition and required fees paid for. If they successfully complete NJ Stars, they can move on to NJ Stars 2 and attend any of the four-year institutions in New Jersey with up to $2,500 a year in additional scholarship. And for students who are both academically and financially disadvantaged, we also have the Educational Opportunity Fund. Your income does have to fall below maximum levels established by the state of New Jersey in order to even be considered for the EOF program. More information on all of these awards, and there are a few others from the state, can all be found at njgrants.org. And that's also the same website. If you miss doing your state questions at the end of the FAFSA, you can also answer them directly through njgrants.org as well. But not yet. You have to wait until after October 1st. Don't forget about your private sources for additional funding. You always want to make sure that you're thinking local and global, so that you're using the resources here in the school for any local scholarships that are available, and then using the internet for a more global reach. There are websites like fastweb.com that are free. That's the main thing when searching for scholarships. Only use free resources. Don't pay to search scholarship databases or pay for to apply for a scholarship. There are plenty of things out there that are for free. There was another handout that I brought with me today. I forgot to grab a sample, but it said 6 things to know about scholarships, and it was some tips for applying for outside scholarships. Now, you've maximized all your grants and scholarships, and you still need more money. So what can you do? There are loans available. There is the Federal Direct Loan Program. These loans are for students to borrow. There's no cosigner, no credit check involved. More information, again, is in the handout from tonight, and you can go to that studentaid.gov website for additional specifics on the loan program. We have 2 types within the federal loan program, subsidized and unsubsidized. And here it comes again. You have to have financial need to get the one type of loan, and it's not required for the other. But this is a way for a student to have some skin in the game themselves, because these types of loans, they borrow on their own without cosigners. And it also helps them build a credit history. And they also have multiple repayment options once they go into repayment after they're out of school. If you maximize the loans that your student can borrow on their own and you still need more money, what do you do? Well, you still have more choices. There are supplemental loan programs that are available. It's possible there may be something from the school to assist you. But then there's also from the federal government, a loan for parents. It's called the Parent Plus loan. It is a credit-based loan that's for parents only to borrow. Parent is the only one responsible for the loan, not the student. You will all groan when I tell you the interest rate currently for this year, it's a fixed rate of 7.6%. But see, look, I predicted it and you did it. Here's the thing that I'll tell you about plus loans. The credit criteria is very lenient. So you don't have to have a good credit score. You don't even have to be employed to potentially be approved for a plus loan. So they have one interest rate, one fixed rate. That means everybody that qualifies for a plus loan gets the same rate, whether you barely squeaked by or you have the best credit ever in the whole entire world. You all get the same rate. So, it is a market-based rate. It is based on the 10-year T-bill auction that happens in May. So there'll be a new rate for you guys for 2019-20. We'll have that rate next June. There's also a supplemental loan program from the state of New Jersey. It's called NJ Class, and you can use it whether you stay in state or if you go out of New Jersey. So as long as you live in New Jersey, you can take it someplace out of state. Their interest rates are based on the repayment option that you choose. They have multiple repayment options, and depending upon which one you choose, that will determine your interest rate. And if you have the really, really good credit and want to try and find something more competitive than the plus loan, there are also what we call private or alternative loans offered by various banks, lenders, credit unions. They establish their own credit criteria, their own interest rates. So you may be able to, if you have very good credit, secure a rate that's below that Parent Plus loan rate. Also, don't forget about employment. The FAFSA is the application for the federal work-study program that allows students to work at on-campus and community service jobs. If they don't qualify for work-study, you can also ask the college, is there a way my student can still work on campus without federal work-study? And certainly off-campus jobs are an option as well. One thing you might want to ask your school about is, do they have a tuition payment plan? So instead of having to put out a large chunk of money 2 times a year when the bills come, is there a way to spread that out over monthly installments? This is not a loan, so there's not any interest on it. There's generally an enrollment fee, and you can fit payments into your monthly budget, different payment options. We have a plan at Monmouth, and you can pay directly out of your bank account. You can put it on a credit card for my frequent flyer mile, whatever points people that you want. So that might be a way for you to make payments that fit into your monthly budget. Okay, so I promise you some tips as well. Okay, I cannot stress this one enough. Read everything. Read all the mail and email that's coming in promptly. I understand you're getting inundated. I know that, but just always make sure that you're taking a look at everything and making sure no action is required. And that when there is action, that if there is a deadline, to please take action within that deadline. Read the instructions on everything. That would go so far to helping us not have problems with FAFSAs. Something as simple as just reading the instructions. So make sure that you do read the instructions. On the FAFSA, if you're having trouble, click those question marks to read additional information about the questions to get help. Within the information that you're taking home tonight, there is a toll-free number for the federal government, for the state of New Jersey. You can also talk to the financial aid office. Keep copies of everything. This is no different than getting car loans and mortgages and things like that. It's important documentation that you want to hold on to. You can print out the FAFSA so that you have all the questions there and all your answers that you provided. You can keep that in printed form. Parents, don't sign your son or daughter's name, apply their FSA ID to any of their financial aid documents. The FSA ID is a legal signature, and your student really needs to be the one that's applying their own, and you need to apply your own. We used to get, now we've switched to an electronic award letter, but when we used to have paper award letters, I used to love when, it would be signed, Joey Smith, but then, with mom's initials on the side. Like, we know that, we catch that. That's not the way it's supposed to be. This is all the students' information, so they do need to be involved in the process. I don't think any financial aid administrator expects their student to know the minutia of every aid program that they have, but they should have an idea and be vested in this process. Parents, if you are technology adverse, you really need to work with your student to get that FAFSA done and have both of you sit there together, because your student will be able to navigate through that website a lot faster than you will if you're technology adverse. And also, a lot of schools have, beyond filing the FAFSA electronically, you might have electronic award letters. If you're selected for verification, it's an electronic process to provide the documentation. And there may be no backup, like you need to do it that way. So students do need to be involved in the process. The FAFSA is their application. Their loans can be theirs. Their grants are theirs. Things that you will see as you go through the process. When that financial aid award letter comes, it is addressed directly to the student, not to the parents of. The bills, when they come, I understand that you may be paying them, but they're addressed directly to the student. That's the person that's attending our institution. You guys as parents are not. So in the end, it is the student's responsibility to make sure that their business is taken care of, that their bill is paid in time, so that they don't lose their registration. The other thing that you'll notice that's different, privacy. So you're used to at school, a teacher can call you, you can call the teacher, check in on things. Can't do that in college. There is a federal law that kicks in that protects the student's education records once they're enrolled in college, even if they're 17. So most schools have a way for students to waive this, or even maybe a way through their online practices to be able to give you access to their information, but that is a conversation that you do need to have with your student about grades, because this means grades. You know, it's possible that you could never see a grade because that's the way that the system works. Their financial aid information, their billing information, there comes a point where I can't tell you anything anymore when you call. I'm not trying to be the giant pain in the butt for you for that day, but I have to abide by the federal laws, and if your student hasn't signed the waiver, I can't give you the information that you want. So again, just make sure that they're, taking care of those types of things. And when you have questions and you're not sure what to do, talk to the financial aid office. We're here to help. We're here to help you for free. I sometimes find that people have polled everyone else in their neighborhood, but not the financial aid office before they've done something. I don't know, do you call the electric company about your water bill? So just talk to the financial aid office. I promise we don't bite. I promise we will help you. We know what we're doing, and we know what we're doing for our specific institution. I'm giving you general information tonight, but I can tell you how our processes and specific work. You want to find out how things work at the school where your student will be attending. So, some further questions to ponder and think about and ask as you move forward. Congratulations, your student has gotten a scholarship or grant award. You want to find out, is it renewable from year to year? And how do we make sure that it's renewable? A lot of times a scholarship requires a certain GPA to be met in order to renew that award from year to year. You want to know that ahead of time. Your student qualified for federal work study. So how did they get a position? How much did they get paid? Or do you guarantee them a job? Congratulations, you have won the Hillsborough Rotary Club Scholarship. So you want to know how that's going to affect your students' other aid that they have. So that is a question to ask of the financial aid office. You know what? You decided you planned your aid, which you can do, with additional money to pay for books, generally through loan money. So I've got this book money. How can I use that? Is that possible? A financial thing to think about. Are there banking options on campus? I know now there's things like Venmo and whatnot, but also, you know what? If you use a traditional bank, how are you going to get your student money when they need money, and can they access cash while they're on campus? And finally, so what if your life has changed since 2017, since that's the income information that we're putting on the FAFSA? So if there's been a job loss, if you've lost some sort of untaxed income benefit, or you've had some other special circumstance, talk to the financial aid office about it. Generally, we all have some sort of process for accepting special circumstances. You might hear it called an appeal, and we can work with you on that. It is done at the school level. don't pack up your documents and send them to Washington, D.C., because the U.S. Department of Education will not review them. Any special circumstance reviews are done at the college level, and the college is the final determiner in what they will accept and what changes that they will make to the income information, and then to ultimately to the student's aid. So know that we can take a look at that. We do understand that life has happened in 2 years. So, but don't be afraid to talk to us about that information. So you made it through the whole presentation. My only one plug for Monmouth is, if you're interested in, a student may be interested in Monmouth, or even if they're not at this time, please feel free to follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page as well as Twitter, and we do post lots of good financial aid information. I'm the human being behind that. So if you want to follow us there, we would appreciate it. It will just give you some general information, especially now with October 1 coming up. So I promised that once I was finished, we would give a few-minute break for everyone that wants to leave, and then I will stay with any of you that have additional questions. And thank you again for coming out tonight.